Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. So, today I'm going to be doing a reading on the kidnapping of Savannah Guthrie's mother, Nancy Guthrie. This all happened within the last week or two. It's a very suspicious story, so I'm pulling some cards here to see what we can get out of it. I do want to say I was very specific with my cards before I pulled anything, and I said I do not want to see any death cards on this table unless we are talking about actual death. No rebirth or metamorphosis or anything like that, right? I did not have any death cards hit the table. I was also very clear about pentacles. I said, I do not want to see any pentacles hit this table unless we are talking about money, specifically the bribery that's going on, right? That they're being extorted in order to get their mother back. So what I will say is that no pentacles hit my table. Oh, except for the Six of Pentacles. Oh, I didn't even notice that. That's interesting. Okay, so we'll get to that in a second. We're updating in real time here. But one of the cards at the bottom of the deck had a pentacle behind it. So I'll start there. At the bottom of the deck, I have the Wheel of Fortune and the Vulture card. So this particular Wheel of Fortune is interesting because it's a very entangled web, right? It seems like it's something that's difficult to penetrate, difficult to peer into, kind of knotted. I feel like this is indicating basically Savannah's inner circle or Savannah's world or network or something like that. But I'm mostly focused on this figure that's just outside of it, this owl that's just at the perimeter of this web that's happening here, right? And the other card was the vulture, right? And it's like I feel like the vulture and the owl are basically the same character. And of course, vultures are something that prey upon death, right? It's like they seek out things that are in the process of dying so that they can swoop in, right? But they're going to wait until whatever it is that they're preying upon is very vulnerable, very weak, indefensible, yada, yada, yada. So this gives me the indication of kind of like a long-term stakeout situation, right? That it's not exactly somebody that's in the inner circle, but 1 degree of separation away, right? So it may not have been anybody that she was friends with or worked with directly, but it would have been somebody that was privy to what she was working on or what her schedule was or what her mother's schedule was, right? But again, like long-term observation, right? What was interesting was that behind the vulture card, I had the Eight of Pentacles, right? And I didn't even notice this Six of Pentacles. So at that time, I thought this was the only pentacle on the table. This Eight of Pentacles, you can see how it looks like a web, right? This makes me think of like, if I had to draw an energetic picture of what I think Bitcoin looks like, it would look something like this, right? Like a spider web with a poisonous spider in the middle. It makes me think of the dark web or the deep web or something like that, right? And the dark web aspect of this comes up again later in the reading. So I'll put that down for a moment. And I'll say the first card on the table is the Nine of Wands reversed. And the Nine of Wands typically talks about negative anticipation, right? A worst case scenario that you feel is inevitable, right? And typically it's like trying to push back against that or block that potentiality from happening. Nine of Wands reversed makes me think that although this is a nightmare, it's shocking, it's horrible, this may have been a fear that was on the horizon, right? That this would have been Savannah's worst nightmare, something that she knew could potentially happen because of the nature of her work, because of something, right? What's very strange is that the next card on the table is the Six of Swords. And the Six of Swords in the Rider-Waite deck is the boat that's going across the water where people are being ferried, right? It's like a timeline jump card from one place to another. It can indicate movement. It almost looks like kidnapping. But within this deck, the Six of Swords is all taking place within darkness, right? And it's under the rainbow as opposed to being over the rainbow. And that was the first thing that I thought when I saw this card was the difference between over the rainbow and under the rainbow. What does that exactly mean? And I'll just say I've done a few readings throughout the years for Hollywood people, whether they were actors, whether they were just in the industry, whatever. I call them Illuminati refugees. And my hot take is that I do think that a lot of the really scary, satanic, worst of the worst kind of stuff that we've heard about, it almost feels as though it doesn't take place in this dimension, right? Where it's like as above, so below. There's the surface internet, and then there's the dark web, right? The dark web is inaccessible, basically, from the surface internet and harder to track and trace. How is it possible that they can get away with these things and there's no evidence, there's so much plausible deniability, there's yada, yada, yada. Is there some kind of physical dark web, right? Like a pocket dimension or something like that, an underworld space, whatever you'd want to call it, where things that happen there are effectively untraceable, right? Where it's like, it happens, it actually physically happens, but it's outside of space and time in such a way that they get away with it. I don't know how to say it, but it's almost something like that, right? Like being ferried to an out of phase space or something like that, which I know is so convoluted, but just bear with me, right? The next card on the table is the golden egg. And the golden egg in the book refers to what Kim Krans calls either the unstruck sound or the unspoken sound or the unsung sound, right? So it's like, it's energetic potential that has not been realized, right? It's contained within something. And within the context of Savannah, she has given voice or amplified the voices of a lot of victims revolving around the Epstein story. And my first thought when I pulled this card was it made me wonder if she was working on a story related to something like Sasha Riley. If you know the Sasha Riley story that came out within the last 3 weeks, it's horrific SRA at levels that we haven't heard about before. Things that we have heard about before, but not in relation to Epstein and Trump, right? And it just made me think if there was something about that, right? But that they were in the process of trying to verify it so that it could be platformed, right? Because it's like, they can't just touch a story like that unless they know that there's some validity or veracity to it, right? They would need something to confirm these allegations, right? And it would almost make me wonder if they were in the process of working through the legal department, right? Because I have Mother of Swords coming up next, right? And the Mother of Swords is the owl that's sitting just outside of this Wheel of Fortune, right? That I thought was also the vulture, right? So it's like, whatever this golden egg is, it's like someone was privy to the unsung song, the voice that had not yet been amplified, right? And yeah, we'll see what that is. I'm just going to pause for 1 second. Sorry, I had to cough. So the unsung song, there's a voice that was in the process of being amplified. The watcher, that's a degree of separation, was aware of this, allegedly for entertainment purposes. And wherever Nancy Guthrie is almost, she's in like a blind spot. That's the best way to describe it, a blind spot. Still on the physical earth, for all intents and purposes, but as above, so below, it would be like the dark web as opposed to the surface internet. The next cards that I have on the table. So this entire line of cards came out in reverse. So I put them upright just so it was easier for me to read, but obviously that affects the energy and how I'm reading these things. So the next card on the table was the Wheel of Fortune. And this Wheel of Fortune, you can see there's this exchange of these two apples here, right? And she's being given the poison apple, right? So in the reverse, the poison apple is up first. Now, the poison apple reminds me of the story of Snow White, of course, right? So the Snow White is given the poison apple by the old lady that she trusts. She doesn't realize that the old lady is the evil queen. She eats the apple. I think it puts her to sleep, right? Something like that. Either which way, it almost makes me wonder if she was being fed poison information, right? I know that there's like a legal term where they talk about, I think they call it the fruit of the poisonous tree, where if authorities are able to, if authorities get evidence illegally, right? Like they don't have a warrant for it or whatever it is, it's almost like they can't use the evidence in a court of law because it then becomes poisonous and it kills the entire argument, right? So I almost wonder if there was something almost like a setup that she didn't even know that she was involved in, where she was being given the fruit of the poisonous tree in order to destabilize this in the long run. And as I'm saying that, it's making me think about within the last 24 hours, there's been a revelation that a lot of the redacted names in the Epstein files, where clearly there is abuse being negotiated back and forth, that those redacted names are actually some of the women who have testified before Congress and gone on TV as victims. But in these emails, they are clearly collaborators. Now, the victim to collaborator pipeline is real. It's horrific, it's dark, it sucks, but it is what it is. It's real. Ain't no NDA on earth is going to keep people as silent as blackmail, right? Actual real blackmail, that they themselves did something bad is more likely to keep them silent than anything. But here they are on TV and speaking before Congress as though they did not engage in any of those things and they were just victims, right? A lot of those women were probably platformed by Savannah Guthrie. She was, from my understanding, I guess you could say, the highest ranking, most visible journalist to really give these victims light and oxygen and exposure and amplify the voices. But the question is, whose voices was she actually amplifying, right? And it's like, I hate to even entertain the thought that the idea that these victims are actually perpetrators in their own right? Because it's like that kind of breaks my brain a little bit and it makes me feel very sad. Because, I don't know, it devolves the trust, right? It's like what I was saying in my last video about consensus reality breaking down because we don't know who to trust anymore, right? It's like if you can't even trust the victims in this story, it's like, what can we believe, right? But again, it's like, if it turns out that they're somewhat guilty, then does it destabilize the entire narrative, right? And if it destabilizes the entire narrative, like the fruit of the poisonous tree, the case gets thrown out, right? The case is no longer admissible in court. The next card on the table is the Strength card, right? But again, all these cards came out in reverse. And this particular Strength card, it's like, this lion looks very trustworthy and noble, and he's showing up with the white rose, right, of purity. But again, all of this is coming out in the reverse, which makes me think that it's like, again, an energy was showing up, presenting as noble, pure, etc., etc., but it was actually the fruit of the poisonous tree. And you can see the symbol on his forehead is the same infinity symbol that shows up on the magician card, right? Roses also show up on the magician card, right? In the magician card, they're on the ceiling because he's sub rosa, and sub rosa basically means we keep our secrets to ourselves, right? How the Illuminati always do the shh. It's like another word you could use for that, the shh. We don't talk about it, or the whole cover in the eye bullshit. That's sub rosa. What happens here stays here, right? Las Vegas, sub rosa. So this came out in reverse right next to the fruit of the poisonous tree. And again, it's like it's presenting as something trustworthy, it's presenting as something noble, but it's actually the magician, right? More so specifically the sorcerer, right? We're talking about sleight of hand, we're talking about manipulation, we're talking about that type of magician, right? The card at the center of the spread, the next card that came out, is the hummingbird, but again, the hummingbird reversed. The hummingbird always, to me, talks about things that kind of defy gravity. I'm sorry. Just because of how the hummingbird defies physics, right? That the physics of the hummingbird are almost impossible, and yet there it is, right? And well, it's like within the context of these cards, the hummingbird is being drawn towards the strength card, right? The thing that we should be able to trust, right? But it feels like a honeypot, right? Honeypots within honeypots within honeypots. And that's what the next couple of cards on the table feel like. With the Page of Cups, and the Six of Pentacles, again, both reversed. So I feel like I have to cover this Six of Pentacles. I don't know why it had to be so lewd in this deck. There's no actual exposure, but it's just too much for me. So Page of Cups, this particular Six of Pentacles, the only pentacles on my table that are talking about money, right? But this is a very seductive honeypot kind of Six of Pentacles, right? And then the Page of Cups is typically talking about an energy of surprise, right? Surprise validation, surprise things coming in return. Again, it's like it feels like honeypots within honeypots, right? That it would almost be like certain, like there are real victims that are not perpetrators, that are truly people that can speak out about this because they have no blood on their hands whatsoever. We've probably only heard from a few of them. It's basically like she was being fed false information in order to manipulate the narrative. I don't know what else to say. That honestly was not where I thought this reading was going to go at all. But it'll be interesting to see as they redact the names of the women that were presenting as victims, but were actually all throughout these emails supplying more and more women to Epstein, girls, I should say, children. It'll be interesting to see how many of them sat down with Savannah Guthrie, and if any of them sat down with her first. But the real question that we have to ask, what team is she playing for, Miss Savannah? Allegedly for entertainment purposes. Because it's kind of hard to trust anybody these days. If I can't even trust the victims in the Epstein story that are allegedly risking it all and yada, yada, yada. And I mean, let's be fair. It's like You look at what happened to Annie Farmer. Annie Farmer was the first victim to come out in the 90s. The woman spent most of her life in hiding. When she did finally come out, she had some sort of horrific cancer that I think she was able to actually survive. But it's like the death threats and the violence and the yada, yada, yada. It's like all of that was very, very real. And then look at what happened to Virginia Giuffre, right? I mean, the number of times that they tried to take that woman out, and they finally did. And so many others, so many journalists, so many, people like Tracy Twyman and stuff like that throughout the years that, again, were also taken out. And it's like, well, what's protecting the girls that can get on NBC and sit before Congress and this, that, and the third? It's like, what's protecting them that they can do that? Again, it's like, I hate to be that cynical, right? It's a horrible thought to even entertain, but it's like, here we are, right? And the only reason why I'm even entertaining that thought is because that's the breaking news today, right? Is that unfortunately, some of these women were in the files supplying more children to Epstein. And again, it looks like they were victims that were groomed to become perpetrators. But, is that really an excuse? I don't know. Thank God I've never been in that position, but I don't understand the psychology of it. But again, it's like, the question is, did Savannah know that she was being given the poison apple? Or did she think that what she was working with was legitimate, right? And that's the other question, is that it's like, there's so many victims out there that we know about that the mainstream media never touches, right? Why didn't the mainstream media ever interview Fiona Barnett and everything that she had to say about Nicole Kidman's father and the Hillsong Church in Australia and the SRA? And what about, I can't remember her name, but, the blonde lady that started speaking out in the 90s and named just about everybody and their mother in terms of politicians and yada yada. Kathy O'Brien, was that her name? I mean, nobody's given them any oxygen, right? And they seem to have tons of receipts that nobody wants to touch, right? So who in the NBC, or excuse me, I don't even want to say NBC, who in any mainstream media office is determining what stories get oxygen in terms of survivors and what stories don't, right? Because let's be real. Maria Farmer does not get that much oxygen. She does not get that much, does not get that much oxygen. Her story has the most evidence. The names she names are crazy, right? She says that every day at 3 p.m., Ivana Trump, the wife, ex-wife, mother of the kids, would show up at Epstein's mansion around 2:30, pick up Ghislaine, and they would go driving around the schools as the schools would get out in order to poach girls as models for Victoria's Secret, right? That should be headline news everywhere. Why haven't we given more oxygen to Maria Farmer, right? But anybody that can kind of point a finger at Epstein exclusively, they get a lot of oxygen. I don't know. The whole thing is very strange to me. The next line, the final line, I have the 10 of Cups reversed as the final line. Now this is where I don't know how this story ends. But I'll just show you. I have 10 of Cups reversed. Let me put it in the right order. There we go. 10 of Cups reversed. So this is not the happy ever after. This is the opposite of the happy ever after. This is not a happy ending card. Okay, so within the context of Nancy being missing, I just want to say that. 6 of Wands. Now the 6 of Wands is very fascinating within the context of this, because the 6 of Wands within the Rider-Waite is a knight that went off to battle that everybody assumed had lost and therefore was no longer alive. But they do return. But it's not a happy ending. I don't know what that means. It could be something like, I'm thinking, I forget the name of that kid that went to North Korea and they sent him to prison. Maybe not kid, he was like in his 20s, right? But he went to North Korea, they sent him to prison, and then finally they were able to get him back, but he was already like brain dead because of what they had done to him in prison, and then he died shortly thereafter, something like that. It's a horrible thing to speculate upon, but it's something like that, where it's like not coming back in good shape, even if they are. And then the next card after the Six of Wands is the Nightingale. And the Nightingale is an energy of grief, typically. It's speaking from a place of grief, right? It's a song that announces mourning. It speaks in the darkness. It speaks from the darkness, right? I was saying that Six of Swords, the dark web, right? It's like there's a barrier, there's a sound barrier, I guess you could say, between the dark web and the visible web, or the dark world and the visible world. There's some sort of sound barrier that contains what it is that happens there, which is why these horrible things can happen and somehow remain contained, right? It's not even as simple as everybody's in on it and everybody covers the evidence and yada yada. It's like, what if the evidence is not exactly even on this plane of reality, right? The victims carry it back to this plane because it's locked in their mind, but like the physical stuff happens out of phase or so. I don't know how that would be possible. I have no idea. But it seems like everybody that Epstein was interested in was a theoretical physicist, so I'll say that much. But when the Nightingale card hit the table, again, the sound of mourning, the song of mourning, it reminded me of the movie Eyes Wide Shut. In the movie Eyes Wide Shut, the piano player that tells Tom Cruise's character about the party and gives him the password and tells him to dress up and yada yada, that character's name was Nick Nightingale. Now, if before this reading, if you asked me, gun to my head, what is the name of the piano player in Eyes Wide Shut, I would have no idea. But Nightingale, it's like it brought it back. Nick Nightingale was the name of the piano player in Eyes Wide Shut. He was the one that gave the information to Tom Cruise. Giving that information to Tom Cruise was basically the death sentence for his character and his character's daughter, right? Because I guess you can analyze it a million different ways, but it looks like if he had not gone to that party, then they would not have required him to give his daughter to the cult, right? It seems like that happened in retaliation to him seeing something he was not supposed to see, right? Now, the Nightingale card is happening right beneath the golden egg, right? So the golden egg is the unsung sound, right? The voice that has not been heard or amplified. It's whatever it is that's caught up in the dark web, beneath the sound barrier, under the rainbow, whatever it is that you want. In the movie Eyes Wide Shut, wasn't there a store called Under the Rainbow? Or was it Over the Rainbow? I guess Over the Rainbow would make more sense, but was it Under the Rainbow? I don't know. But either which way, it's like that entire movie feels like it took place in a pocket dimension, right? It's like the movie itself is adapted from a book that's called Traum Novel, which is dream novel, right? Which kind of implies that the entire thing could be a dream, even though it's really real. And it's like there's this evidence that bleeds through, and there's the story about the hooker that overdosed that Tom Cruise knows was actually killed by the cult, and there's the story about this that bleeds through, but it's like you can't really put it together. It's like the synchronicity is there, but if you try to actually present the evidence, you just look schizophrenic, right? It's like it's designed in such a way to make you look schizophrenic if you talk about it, right? But it's like this Nightingale that's happening in response to the Ten of Cups reversed, which is not a happy ending, And that Six of Wands, which is making me think of that kid being released from North Korea in bad shape, that it's like the response to that, the cry of mourning, is this nightingale, which seems like an amplification of this unsung song, right? Amplifying a voice that we haven't heard before, bringing something to the surface, which eventually leads to the rabbit. The rabbit is the final card that's on the table. I would assume that if I went down the rabbit hole, I would be looking for the rabbit, right? What the heck else is going to be down there? The rabbit. This story seems to be designed to bring people down the rabbit hole. Designed by whom, right, is the real question. Designed by source, designed by spirit to wake us up and expose this thing, or designed by the wicked witch with the poison apple to trick us into misdirecting this narrative and corrupting the entire narrative, right? I just want to rearrange my cards for a second just to see if there's anything else that I can pull out of this. Sorry. You know, forgive me for just being silent. I know that does not work very well on YouTube, but this is a heavy energy. I will tell you that much. This is a heavy, heavy, heavy energy, and I don't like it. But again, it's like this vulture energy at the beginning that's been stalking this situation for a while. It's like with the rabbit at the end of the reading, it's like, where is this narrative leading us to? Right? Is it leading us towards another honeypot within a honeypot within a honeypot? Or does it actually expose the golden egg? Right? It's like my philosophy, what I feel in the deepest core of my being, in my heart, is that all of this is going to be exposed by the divine. But the bad guys in this narrative are doing bad things that they don't realize is accelerating the exposure, right? They think that they're covering it up. They think that they're steering the collective or the timeline in this particular direction. They think that they're working for, I don't know, the devil, something dark and effed up like that, whatever it is that they think that they're working for. But they don't realize that they are actually being puppeted and manipulated by source to expose this entire thing. And that really feels like, again, the nightingale and the golden egg, where it's like, again, within the context of Eyes Wide Shut, right, the nightingale is the one that gives the password and the address to Tom Cruise's character, Bill. And what would he have given him? Again, the password, the address, the location, and the outfit to wear, right? Which is like how to blend in, how to penetrate the inner circle. Because it's like, for some reason, it wants to bring me back to this spider web card, which I was saying was like the dark web or the Bitcoin web. And this entire thing has been about an email ransom in Bitcoin. And there's a part of me that wonders if this narrative is going to end with them delivering the Bitcoin and somehow, some way, tracing that transaction to actually expose the perpetrators. If that happened, Bitcoin would go to zero the next day. Bitcoin's only value is in the fact that it's untraceable. It is literally a human trafficking currency, right? It's a dark web currency. If somehow, some way, they're able to figure out how to trace and track that transaction, it means that they can trace and track any transaction. But there's something about like the crafting of the narrative, right? Like I'm just seeing how Savannah works for a media company, right? Now I'm not saying she has anything to do with the construction of this narrative, but she works for a company that constructs narratives professionally, right? They determine what gets platformed, how it gets presented, how it gets framed. They are building the modern mythos in real time, right? Not just NBC, but all media companies. That is what they do. They build narratives. There's something like this, like how I'm saying that I feel like the divine is in control, right? It's like we're trying to get from point A to point B. And we'll say that point B is the new earth, right? But the new earth, it ain't easy to get there. We are trying to accelerate our way towards the new earth. And it's kind of like the idea of the red pill, blue pill, right? That it's like you can't just wake somebody up. You can't just force somebody to wake up and figure out what's going on here. It's like they kind of need to figure it out for themselves. Like I always say with the red pill, blue pill, by the time Morpheus offers that to Neo, Neo had already discovered the Matrix. He's in the chat rooms talking about it. Reality was already glitchy in synchronicity. He was there. He was ready. So it's like there's something about this story that makes me think that it is a narrative bridge that is like expediting the amount of time that it takes to go from point A to point B. It's jumping over something, right? And it's leading the collective down this rabbit hole, right? Because the collective is very suspicious right now, right? They're overanalyzing everything, especially within the context of all of the Epstein gate and yada yada. People are, again, like I was saying, where it's like the fine line between being a journalist and being a schizophrenic in the year 2026. Because the places that your mind needs to go and the dots that your mind needs to connect in order to make sense of this are quite crazy, right? But the dots are connecting and the mind is going to those places. And it seems like the collective is kind of there right now, right? Where it's like the collective is assuming that something very, very, very strange and shady is going on that does not make sense, right? Because I don't think we've ever seen a kidnapping story like this before where it's like the kidnappers are using the media and the media is complying, right? Because the kidnappers, from what I understand, are going through TMZ, so not even NBC, unless they are going through NBC and NBC is just not telling us, but they're going through TMZ and commanding Savannah and her family to do things which they are doing, right? So they're not going through law enforcement. They're trying to make a spectacle of it, but they are also showing that the media is part of the concoction of this story. And let's face it, how many people are being energetically held hostage by the cachet of files that TMZ is sitting on, right? You don't think TMZ has dirt on everybody in Hollywood? Please. Please. They know everything. But again, they choose what gets air and oxygen and what doesn't. And I think maybe that's like the final thing that I'll say about this, is that it's like one thing that's really kind of, don't want to say the most disturbing out of all of this, but one of the things that has disturbed me about all of this is that you see names in the file of people in media, journalists, pundits, whatever, that have spoken about this as though it's the most abhorrent thing, but then it turns out that they're involved in it. And it's like, I don't understand how somebody could compartmentalize these different aspects of their life and be involved in this dark web, this dark world, and get on TV like a normal person, right? It's like there's a lot that's coming out in the files where it's like there's different people that he was associated with that were healers and wellness gurus, and Deepak Chopra is all over it, right? So he's, one of the original mindset, law of attraction kind of people and wellness gurus. And there was another woman that was in the files that was clearly a wellness guru, doing the sound baths and yada yada. And it's like, how could somebody go there day in, day out, making content on TikTok about opening your chakras while participating in these horrific sacrilegious acts with Jeffrey Epstein? How could you possibly do both of those things? And it almost seems like it's like two different realities, right? Where it's like a switch can be flipped and you become one person and you do one thing, and then the switch is unflipped and you go back to your other life, and it's like not all of the memories transfer. I don't know what that is. Again, not an excuse, not an apology, not whatever, but it's like, again, like I was saying, even the movie Eyes Wide Shut, right? It's like, did any of that happen, or was it just a dream, or was it just made to look like a dream so that Tom wouldn't know whether or not it happened, or yada, yada, yada. And now it's like the same thing is happening to the collective, where it's like the collective is like, is this actually happening, or is this just some sort of collective hallucination? Am I going crazy? Is this, you know what I'm saying? So, long story short, it looks like it doesn't exactly, there's nothing about this that's a happy story, but the levels of lies are so shocking that it's almost impossible to make sense of. Because I'm just thinking, it's like, if that is validated, that some of these people that have been presented as victims were actually perpetrators that have been set up by this network, the cabal, to effectively poison the well and muddy the waters and maybe keep everything focused on Epstein or particular characters or whatever that is. It's like that changes the game, right? And that aligns with the notion that perhaps Epstein was even behind QAnon, right? Which is wild, considering that QAnon was about going after people like Epstein, right? But the beauty of QAnon for people like Epstein is that was a poison apple, right? QAnon was designed to completely delegitimize any conversation about the things that we talk about when we talk about Epstein, right? QAnon was designed to delegitimize that, right? So that any quote unquote rational intellectual person, if you presented that to them, they'd say, oh, you're crazy, right? But think about it, right? Leading up to 2020, right? The year 2020, when all of that went down, we had Pizzagate in 2015, QAnon and the Me Too movement in 2017. We had the Flat Earth thing, which went viral between 2016 and 2017. And I wholeheartedly believe that those three things were designed to basically prime the consciousness of the collective to reject any dissent in terms of the 2020 narrative as hogwash conspiracy theory, right? If you question what Big Pharma is telling you to do, you're a flat earther Pizzagator, and the mind just shuts it down, right? Here we are 6 years later, quite validated and unfortunately correct about everything, right? And the collective is starting to realize that it seems like the conspiracy theorists are more accurate than the media. And what is at the bottom of the rabbit hole but the rabbit? So somehow, some way, this collective journey that we're on, this story arc, this narrative that's being built, eventually leads to the rabbit. But in the process of getting there, we are going to go through illusion after illusion after illusion. So I guess what this is saying is discernment up, intuition up, question everything. Question everything. And if anything, honestly, turn your social media off. That's what I need to do. I need to just turn my Twitter off, turn the Instagram off, right? It doesn't matter what you're scrolling on Instagram these days. You could be trying to look at, fun puppy videos. You get 3 scrolls deep and it's giving you another reason to hate Israel today. You know what I mean? It's just like, leave me alone. It's like there's no reason that everything needs to be so polluted with this insanity. But here it is. It's inescapable. And I guess ultimately it's moving in the right direction, right? We want the disclosure. We want all of this to come to the surface, but it is brutal on the mind, right? It's like, that's one thing about this particular rabbit hole, the SRA, is that there are rabbit holes and there are rabbit traps, right? Rabbit traps. Your mind does not need to know every single horrific probability. It's sometimes okay to say, like, okay, I know that that's there. I don't need to learn any more about it. I don't need every sick and twisted detail. Because that's the one thing that I can shut off, is that it's like, I don't even want to know with certain things. Like the Sasha Riley thing, couldn't get through it. Don't need to sit through 6 hours of that. I believe him. That's all I need to know. But again, it'll be interesting to see what turns out to be false. And again, it seems like most of the alleged victims that are now being exposed as perpetrators were the ones that were kind of exclusively pointing the finger at Jeffrey and Ghislaine, and maybe one other, where it would be, like a Prince Andy situation, this, that, and the third, but no other names have really been given, right? We've been told about this big list of names and yada, 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 yada. And perhaps that's just out there as collateral, right? Because you have to think, it's like, if the entire network is going down, maybe this is extortion. Maybe this is a how do I protect my own, SYA, as they say, save your behind. And maybe some of the people that started as victims, became perpetrators, thought that this whole thing was going to last forever, see it falling apart, realize, how do I protect myself? Maybe I can just blackmail these people that were already being blackmailed. Again, it's a sick and twisted thought, but welcome to 2026. Well, that is pretty much it. If anyone is interested in reading for themselves, okay, I don't just do missing persons readings. I also do love readings sometimes, so it doesn't always have to be dark. But my prayers to Savannah and Nancy's family. I hope that we can have a happier ending than anything, but I just don't know what to believe anymore. Okay, I'm just going to leave it there. I love you guys. Thank you so much. Bye, y'all.